for tuning in to the Wingspace podcast. This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Hey there, and welcome to the Wingspace podcast, a place to take up space. In today's episode, I'm going to be having a conversation with Sherrye Urtz, who is a clinical counselor and a expert on grief. It's important as we enter these next weeks and months of the holiday season that we recognize where grief impacts us and how we can hold space for the loss that we are experiencing. So, Sherrye, I'm glad to have you with us today on our episode.
Thank you so much.
Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do, and maybe where your expertise comes from in terms of working with grief?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Sherrye Urtz. I'm an LCPC, and I have been working in the field of grief for about 15-ish years now, after experiencing my own grief when my daughter died. Grief is complicated. It's unique. It's unique to everyone. And ultimately, as I hope our conversation will bring out today, the goal is for all of us to get to the point where we can remember with joy, where we can find meaning and make purpose. And really, all of our grief, whatever it is, it needs to be witnessed, and that with that brings healing. So I hope that people can find some tips today and really start that process during these next months, because we know that there's a lot of holidays throughout the year, but for some reason this time of year, November and December, that's chock full of holidays, and it really is the toughest time for year when it comes to grief, whether we're talking about death related and losing someone that we have loved who has passed away, or having to have said goodbye to somebody because we've had to, end a relationship for another reason, or some other kind of loss. Maybe someone's lost a marriage or a job, or the list goes on and on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in our recent episodes, we've been talking about boundaries, and we've talked about habits, and kind of looking at how to survive and ultimately thrive through the holidays. And if someone is experiencing grief of any of those kinds you've mentioned, looking at how to survive and thrive is complicated, because we have to include that component of grief. Mm-hmm. So I thought that it was important that we have this conversation, so that as our listeners are saying, yeah, I want to have healthy habits during the holidays, but fill in the blank, whatever they're experiencing from a grief perspective. So we have talked recently about this idea of setting boundaries, and sometimes I think boundaries can be looked at as kind of the bumpers, in the bowling lane that keep us from going into the gutter, so to speak. And in life, sometimes we have to set those boundaries to just give us a place to bounce and feel safe. So maybe that's a good place for us to start, in terms of what does it look like as we go into the holidays when we start to set those boundaries, and maybe why we need to set those boundaries.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. I remember myself all those years ago being conflicted, especially about wanting to participate in the excitement and joy, but simultaneously either I didn't want to participate or I felt guilty about participating. So there's so much emotion involved, and there's going to be conflict. So one, expecting and being ready for that conflict, regardless of if it's, week 1, month 1, year 1, or year 25. So remember, everybody grieves differently. There is no right or wrong. There's only healthy and unhealthy. So allow yourself to set boundaries. You can participate and not participate in whatever feels right for you. So if there's a holiday party, a family gathering, a holiday show, remember to check in with what feels right for you. If it feels right, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. It might be helpful to commit to something that sounds fun while remembering that you can give yourself an out. You don't have to stay for the whole thing. If you go to a family dinner and you want to leave before dessert, that's okay. And the boundary that you're setting is finding a voice to advocate to leave before dessert, to tell everybody I really need to leave now, to not allow yourself to feel that guilt. You're also allowed to skip the holiday if you need to. That's totally okay. Finding a balance between engaging in what you need or want to engage in and not pushing yourself is very important. There's a balance and a fine line between taking care of yourself while you're grieving and avoidance. Again, if we're talking 25 years after and you've totally given up the holiday, then maybe you need to, find somebody, a counselor, a therapist to talk to, and we might be talking about some kind of complicated grief. But that first year, you're entitled to those boundaries for sure.
I'm just thinking as you were talking that there may be folks listening who are not have not experienced grief or are not experiencing grief right now, but they may be inviting folks into their home who they know or they don't know are experiencing grief. So how might someone kind of on the outside of that grief be able to support someone who is saying, I just need to leave right now?
Hey listeners, quick intermission with one of our providers at Hope and Healing, Kristen Wilson, LCSWC, who has started offering a new program at Hope and Healing for our couples called Prepare and Enrich. So Kristen, could you give us a little more information about that program?
Prepare and Enrich is a service that we'll be offering to premarital couples. It is a strength-based program that utilizes assessment portion and then subsequent sessions to look at that assessment and discuss what are your strengths, what are the areas of growth, what are conversations that you'd like to have as you are leading up to and preparing for marriage. One of the nice things about Prepare and Enrich is that it covers not only a wide variety of areas, but it can be utilized with couples that are in different stages of life as well. So maybe this is your first marriage. Maybe it is a blending of families that come into play when you are preparing for this. So the idea is that we can support you in that process and support you in having conversations with your partner and planning ahead for success.
And if someone is listening and is interested in seeking out this service for themselves and their partner, how could they go about inquiring or scheduling an appointment?
Contact us at Hope and Healing. You can go to the website and send us your information and we'll get back with you, or you can give us a call and we'll get you scheduled. There's more than one option when it comes to utilizing this program. This is a set group of sessions. So you will either be choosing to engage in 4 sessions or 8 sessions, depending on what your needs are, what your interests are, and what works for you. The assessment is part of both of those, the skill building, the recognizing our growth areas and working on those are included in both of those sets. So you will get that experience, but just the timing of it might look different depending on your needs.
Yes, so you can give us a call at 301-690-8404, extension 0. If you get the voicemail, make sure that you leave us one so that we can give you a call back within 24 hours. You can also visit our website, like Kristen mentioned, at hopehealingtherapy.com.
Have your plan B, whether it's Chinese just for you and your immediate family at home or whatever. Make sure you have a plan B as well, because sometimes, a lot of times, our emotions just come over us, and we shouldn't be forced during grief or any time for that matter to to have to sit with them, right? That's also part of our boundary, being able to set that boundary that, yes, we need to sit with our grief. That's part of being able to heal from it. But if having 50 of your closest friends and families is not the way for you to handle Thanksgiving, that's okay. Mm-hmm. So having that plan B, that escape plan, an escape word, whatever, to be able to leave. That's a huge way to cope. Maybe movies, holiday movies, puts you in the spirit. That's great. If this year they're triggering to you and they just make you cry, feel it for a little while. If it's too much, again, have a plan B. Not watching Snoopy's Christmas for 1 year is going to be okay. We all know that nature is one of the best coping mechanisms out there. I mean, I can tell you what everybody tells you. Take a walk in nature, take a run in nature, walk your dog in nature. You could literally sit on your porch or sit in the grass in nature, but be mindful outside. I promise you it is one of the best things for grief. Listen to the birds, listen to any noise you can outside, your 5 senses outside. Mm-hmm.
Our listeners are used to hearing me say that. Take a walk, be mindful, listen to what's around you. Absolutely.
Try something new this holiday season, something you've never done before. If you have never gone and looked at Christmas lights, go look at them. It's okay if you get teary, but really what you're doing is creating a new tradition. So create a new tradition, because guess what? What we're trying to do is integrate something new this year. So find something new. Likewise, a great way to cope is honor an old tradition. If what you're grieving, if your loved one, if your family celebrates Christmas and your loved one always put the angel or the star on top of the tree, find a way to honor that tradition. Pass it on to someone else. Maybe this year you leave it off the tree in honoring that. if you always made sugar cookies with grandma and grandma's the one that passed away, maybe you make grandma's sugar cookies. Again, remember there is those boundaries. If it's too much this year to make the sugar cookies, we can let traditions, we can let them slide. We can create a new one. Maybe you make brownies this year. So these are all really good coping mechanisms. You can finding new ways to bring joy into this season, whether it is quote unquote holiday or not. If the holiday music doesn't cheer you up, put on a different kind of music.
What I'm hearing you say, kind of woven within this idea of coping, is that sometimes we get really stuck on traditions and we think we have to do it this way because it's the way we've always done it. And giving ourselves permission to do it differently, because by nature, we are in the midst of grief. It is different anyway.
That's right.
So giving ourselves permission to either do it differently this year, create something different this year, set it aside, but just giving yourself permission to not try to make it exactly like it was the last time that this loved one was a part of that.
Because the fact is, it is not exactly the same as it was the last time that the loved one was part of it. And quite honestly, it won't ever be. So finding a way to include our loved one, now that our loved one is spiritually with us in our heart, how can we include in our own way our loved one in that, right? So it might be in making grandma's cookies. It might not be that way this year. It might be, some people love the symbol of cardinals. It might be in, including a cardinal somewhere in decorating or in a tree. It might be, people tell me all the time, at a Thanksgiving table, they'll set an empty seat. There are so many ways to do it. It's not right or wrong. Different cultures do it different ways. It's about what works for you and what feels right. If it doesn't feel right, then you're not going to do it. It's not going to be healing to you. It's very natural to feel that you may never enjoy this time of year again, and that you just want to skip it all. But I encourage you to find a way to sit with the pain of grief and do just what you can handle, knowing that there is a way for you individually to include and remember the person that you love during this time of year.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And, whether it's during the holiday season or not, looking at what's working and what's not working and giving ourselves permission, we just said giving ourselves permission to not hold true to the tradition, but also giving ourselves permission to see what's working and what's not working. Yeah. And sometimes grief is so different that the coping skills that have always worked for us may not work now. And knowing that we might have to think outside of the box, we might have to consider other ways to process the emotions, feel the emotions, process the emotions, and work through them, because what we used to do doesn't work right now. And knowing that that's okay, but what other tools do we then have in the toolbox that we can try that this isn't working?
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point, because especially in a family, so, if we're talking, if a child is the one that has passed away, two parents, a husband and a wife, they do not grieve the same way, especially around the holidays. And that can be tough, because you already, mentioned that one may need to be surrounded by friends and family, and one may need to, be home and not celebrate for the year. So that kind of goes back to plan A, plan B, and communication and setting boundaries. And in this year, again, it's okay to do you, so long as you're communicating with your family and it works for the family. It might be totally okay if wife is the one that needs to be surrounded with family for an hour or two, and husband wants to watch the football game. I'm totally being stereotypical here, and just sit at home. But so long as the two are communicating and that works for them, and then they, meet back up.
Yeah, a compromise of that instead of all day long with 50 family members and versus all day long sitting at home, binge watching whatever, finding a compromise to that. And I would like to spend some time with our family. You would like to spend some time alone. What does that look like for the two of us to do that, for both of us to have our needs met?
Yeah. Likewise, we say like, we not having the holiday this year. I can't tell you how many families I've worked with that have just they've gone away for that first Thanksgiving or that first Christmas. So it was just, if they had children or whatever, it was just the immediate family. So there was no bombardment of 50 of their closest friend and family members. And certainly that's not an option for everybody, but that is another take on kind of that first year during this holiday season. One way to a different way to cope during that holiday time, a different way to experience that. Some people don't want to if you don't want to put up the Christmas tree and have the decorations, it's another way to do that and not have to feel.
Yeah. I hesitated as to whether or not I was going to offer my own self-disclosure during our conversation today, given that I am in the midst of this experience that we're talking about. But what you just mentioned makes me laugh, because you probably remember those old ceramic Christmas trees, right? The tabletop ones, and you had all the lights. And I remember as a kid, they were supposed to be glued in, but they always fell out. So my brother and I would rearrange all the lights. Well, my mom doesn't want to put up a Christmas tree this year. She wants to not have Christmas, but knows that she wants to have Christmas. So we're in this interesting conflict. And so she's purchased a new ceramic Christmas tree because, the one from years ago, it broke, and, I'm sure she tossed it in a cleaning binge at some point. And so we saw one and thought, what a cool idea to bring back some nostalgia of how cool we all thought those things were, years and years ago. But for her also to have a small Christmas tree in her home and not feel like she feels guilty because she doesn't have the tree, but she doesn't want to have the tree. So
maybe a new tradition for her too, whether or not, what she does moving forward, maybe it's,
Yeah. And I think that it's important for folks to remember that what you do doesn't necessarily commit you to the future.
Right.
With this particular item, she could have a big 7-foot Christmas tree in the future if she wanted, and still have the little tabletop ceramic one. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And so folks can remember that even though this year might look a little different, it certainly feels different. We can incorporate next year, this new tradition becomes part of the old tradition, and then it just becomes something new. It's interesting how different folks do what they need to do to be able to manage through the times. Any other particular coping skills or strategies that you might think folks might want to have in their toolbox?
I'm kind of moving into a little bit to sometimes ways to externalize things, and coping tools are very similar, but for people who are faith-based, this can be a very spiritual and faithful time of year. So bringing their faith back into it, praying, attending masses, whether around Thanksgiving or around going to temple around Hanukkah, going to church around Christmas, that can, putting their trust back into their faith can definitely help to uplift their spirits and remind them of reconnecting with their loved one. externalizing in ways like I talked a little bit about the symbolism behind cardinal. Same things with like butterflies and ladybugs. Just, we all have little things that we see that remind us. Lighting a candle can be very symbolic of remembering a loved one. So again, whether you light it, all day on that holiday, whether you light it at the table when you're eating, that's externalizing. If you pray before you eat and you bless your food, saying a special prayer of remembrance for your loved one. Again, that's just remember that in grief, our ultimate goal is to remember with joy. No one is ever going to forget that someone they loved has died or that they have lost something. But ultimately, our goal when we think about our loved one is to remember great memories, things about them that make us smile, things that they taught us. And if we get there, when we get there, that's a huge accomplishment. That's truly integrating that person into our life. Telling stories, especially at Thanksgiving. So many people I know when they're eating go around the table and, something you're thankful this year or whatever. Tell stories, have people tell great stories of those who are no longer with us. I'm going to guarantee you those stories are going to make you laugh. Those are the things that get us to remember with joy and get us laughing and maybe some tears too, but tears and laughter at the same time are such a wonderful emotion.
And making sure that I want our listeners to hear that it's okay to laugh and it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel the feelings. So some people say, oh, well, I don't want to talk about it or I don't want to tell stories because it's going to make me upset. Well, maybe we are upset because that person is not here, but let's harness into the joy that those memories bring. Let's really capture the warmth of those funny stories, those happy memories, because those are the things that are going to help to have that person continue to live on in our life, is those memories and those nice feelings that those memories bring up for us.
That's right. I cannot take the credit for this saying, but one of my favorite sayings, it's not just in grief, really, it's in all emotion, but is you got to feel it to heal it. And you really, we really do, right? You've got to feel the emotion and just sit with it. And especially in storytelling at any time. It could be sitting around a bonfire. Storytelling is great because you'll get the stories of, those silly, dumb things people did and got in trouble for that at the time weren't so funny, but now are really funny, that just make you laugh. Many you've probably heard before, and occasionally you'll hear some that you never knew that just are going to touch your heart.
Absolutely. That saying that you just shared, that you have to feel it to heal it, I've heard it even taken one step further, is that you first have to reveal it. We have to recognize our pain. We have to recognize and put it out there. And
right.
We don't have to hide it. We don't have to, shove it under a rock or in a closet or something. It's okay to acknowledge that there's pain. And then we have to go through that process of feeling it so that we can work through that healing.
That's right. Grief especially, it needs to be witnessed. You can't go through it alone. You need to share your story. People need to know who this person was that was so great to you, and why it's so earth-shattering to you to have lost this person.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned the idea of symbolizing or externalizing the loss and using faith. What might you share with someone who is struggling with their faith as they approach the holidays because of maybe some internal conflict they're having with God or with their own faith and understanding this loss?
Well, first and foremost, I would say it's okay. It is 100% okay. I think even their pastor would say it's okay. I would encourage them to return and maybe talk to somebody, whether it's their pastor or a deacon or someone from, if it's a woman's group. And again, just share their struggle, because I can promise them they're not alone. Someone has been there with them. And if they share that, then to hear, oh, I've been there too, here's what helped me, can be so uplifting. And sometimes we need to be angry for a little while. Sometimes we need to be sad for a little while. And once we're ready to let that go and recognizing the benefit is no longer sitting with us and that our faith is going to give us more of a benefit, there's people to support us within our faith community. But it's okay. Your faith community is not going to shut the door on you.
Yeah. We've spent a good bit of time talking about things that people can do in terms of that active coping and setting boundaries. Do you have kind of the list of do's and don'ts that might help? Some things that are definite do's and then things that maybe folks should avoid?
Yeah, so you said earlier probably the most important do, and it's do give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to, most importantly, be gentle with yourself. So if it's to not attend a family dinner, if it's to go away this year, if it's to not put up decorations, whatever, to give yourself permission to do what feels good to you, as long as it's healthy. And of course, we're talking about, doing everything healthy. So give yourself permission to be gentle with yourself and with others. Give yourself time to allow these feelings. This is an emotional roller coaster, and these feelings do not magically go away. You do not magically feel like, rainbows and unicorns in days, weeks, or even months. This process takes a very long time. So being gentle on yourself is so important. And I think what people notice is that maybe not so much each day we feel a little bit better, but maybe each week, maybe as the weeks go by, we start to realize that as I hear more stories, I'm laughing a little bit more. Allow others to help. So often we feel like we need to do everything on our own, especially around the holidays. My goodness, if someone is offering to pick up gifts for you, allow them. In our society, especially around grief, we've gotten pretty good at allowing people to bring us meals. So around the holidays, when people offer things, if people say, "What do you need?" take a minute and think. What do I need? Is someone running to Target? Do I need laundry detergent? Oh my goodness, you know what? I need a couple of gift cards. Take people up on it.
Yeah, and what you just said kind of put a few things into perspective for me too, is this idea that you said a little bit ago, to have, what your plan A is, but to have a plan B. And then you were talking about, be gentle with yourself and accepting help. So I'm imagining the person that says, no, I don't want to go to the family event this year, and they're sitting at home, and then they realize, I wish I was there. And allowing yourself to say, I said I wasn't going to go, but I want to go. So I'm going to call that family member and say, no pressure.
That's right.
I'm headed your way. And giving yourself permission to change the plans, because those family members are going to, or friends or coworkers, they're going to accept you with open arms. They're going to say, come on in, let's make room. Lots of people have these grand tablescapes sometimes at Christmas and different holiday. I know they'll make space, right?
That's
so,
right.
So don't think, oh, it's too late, I've already said, no, I'm not going. No, pick up the phone and say, I actually think I do want to come, even if it's super last minute, and give yourself permission to just change your mind.
That's right. Another big do pay attention to the kids. I can't tell you how many people say to me, I have to be so strong for the kids. Strong doesn't mean I don't cry, I don't break down, I don't feel my feels. Strong is the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. Strong actually means you feel the feels. Mm-hmm. And our kids take their cues from us, mm-hmm. right? Our kids learn how to do almost everything they do from us. Mm-hmm. So if my child sees me cry, might they get upset and cry? Perhaps. But if my child sees me feeling my feels, my child's going to know that it's okay to feel his feels. So what I'm saying is our kids learn how to grieve from us. You don't have to hide it from them.
In the same way that it's okay that they see us laugh and smile and
100%
enjoy the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting the way that our society has defined this idea of strength, and that so many people, the world tells us that strong means not feeling or showing the emotion. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you and I could talk about this all day long, and I know we agree that strength is the exact opposite. Strength is acknowledging what it is and then allowing yourself to feel it, because it helps us to grow through that process.
Yeah. If I might share just a couple of don'ts. I don't know about you, but personally around the holidays, I always take on more than I can because I feel like I can, mm-hmm. like I need to help out mm-hmm. others. So don't be afraid to say no during this time. Don't be afraid to give yourself space and say, I just can't do it mm-hmm. this year. I can't send whatever. I can't help out at school. I can't do this. Don't keep your feelings bottled up, and don't grieve unhealthy. So when feelings really hurt, sometimes we just want them to go away. And again, you and I both know that sometimes to make those feels stop, one of the easiest ways is turning to substances. By no means am I saying don't enjoy a glass of wine or a drink with your holidays, but what I'm saying is, let's not try to turn those feels off by overindulging.
Yeah, that's good stuff. My hope is always when folks listen to the podcast that they'll listen, they'll grab a nugget or two, and they might come back and listen to it again. Maybe they'll say, oh, well, this isn't relevant to me right now, but maybe later they'll say, is there a topic that's relevant to me? So this is good stuff. And I hope that our listeners, whether they are actively in the midst of grief, supporting someone who is in the midst of grief, or someone who at some point will grieve,
Absolutely.
That they're grabbing nuggets. Any last minute thoughts or ideas that you want folks to hear?
Again, I think for me the most important thing that I want people to take from this for the holiday season is that no two people grieve the same way. Mm-hmm. Grief is so unique, and the holidays are such a difficult time already, even for mm-hmm. those who aren't necessarily grieving, that really, truly set the boundaries, set them now. Just know what's important to you now. Set those boundaries, and don't be afraid to find your voice and advocate for yourself, so that you can truly work through this time in your journey. That's all you can do, is get through this time right now, hopefully with a few memories that bring you joy.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, Sherrye, so much for being with me today and having this conversation. Listeners, I hope that you have taken away a nugget or two that can help you as you enter these very busy holiday seasons, as you carry potentially carry some grief with you, but that you're going to make space for healing and, like Sherrye said, to have some joy in the midst of it all. Thank you again for listening, and you can always reach out through our DMs, or you can email me, Jennifer, at hopehealingtherapy.com. Have a great day.